Can you hear me okay, Kevin?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm on the road.
Oh, okay. Where
So-
are you headed? You're heading home?
Yeah, I'm heading home right now.
Okay. Hi, Aldrich, how are you?
Hello, doing all right.
Good. All right, I'll share my screen. I want to go over a couple of things to do with the project which I'd introduced last week. Let me go to the modules first. Sorry, I should have had that there. So I'll drag this one up actually and move it up to here now. So I just want to make sure that you understand this project okay. So the idea of it is that I had just added a rubric. Did I not save that? Oh my goodness. I'm going to have to do the rubric again. Sorry. I just finished doing the rubric and I guess I closed out of it without saving it. So there isn't a rubric on here now. Bloody hell. The idea of it is you're going to create 3 posters. And I think that, for me anyway, I think a really important aspects of perhaps any creative process, but in the context of graphic design and typography, like combining or working with this idea of order and chaos. So I've given you these sort of 2 like opposing styles, if you want, the Swiss style and deconstruction in graphic design, for you to kind of explore these 2 different ideas. So this is not strictly true that the Swiss style and deconstruction are exact opposite, maybe, but I think it's a good sort of frame of reference. So if you remember from last week, the Swiss style is really all about creating a sense of order. I had just written out a bunch of criteria in the rubric, but I can sort of list them anyway. The Swiss style poster is the easiest to explain because there's really a sort of set of guidelines that are fairly hardwired into the style. So these are, first of all, that almost exclusively you would use sans serif typefaces. Typefaces like Helvetica, typefaces like Accidents Grotesque, something like that, without any decorative elements of the serifs. The other thing is that the design style was almost always asymmetrical in structure. The typography, when it was laid out in blocks of text, was usually left-aligned type. There was oftentimes a big contrast between big versus small to create drama. And there's real importance laid on hierarchy of typography, the order of importance. So you have one thing. The idea is really to create a very legible piece of design so that you can read through it as efficiently and effectively as possible. That's basically what you're trying to do with the Swiss design. It's all about legibility. There's kind of an almost a lack of emotion in it. Is maybe this isn't quite the right wording I was trying to give you, but it's really a kind of engineering of the design rather than a kind of artistic expression. And then deconstruction. The word deconstruction is a little bit confusing from the offset. And it also is a bit intimidating, I think. But basically what I'm looking at here in graphic design is that there is a reaction to the Swiss style. And it really starts perhaps before deconstruction seeps into graphic design. So with the Swiss style, it sort of starts in the 50s and 60s, continues into the 1970s, and it's still a very dominant style, which is used today. It kind of got co-opted by corporate, international corporations. So maybe that's part of the reason it became the international style, is this same style can be used whether it's in the United States or in Japan or in Europe. It's kind of like everything is the same approach, but this is the way that you do design. It's very kind of dogmatic in a way. So that one's fairly easy to understand. With deconstruction, it's more like when they're revolting against that, There's some examples in the 1960s, I think, like the psychedelic posters of the 1960s are a reaction to some extent against corporate America and against the sort of system. Most of the time it's in the context of design where it's a reaction against, you know, there's a sort of ironic, humorous approach in some ways. There's also a playful approach. In terms of typographic design, there's sometimes a purposeful obfuscation, like obscuring of the information. You make it literally a little bit harder for people to read in a way to make it more entertaining and more interesting to try to figure out the information. So that happens a little bit in the psychedelic posters. Let me show you some examples of those to show you what I mean. So this is not what I mean by deconstruction, but so Wes Wilson is one of the most famous of the psychedelic posters. But you can see that they're nothing like the Swiss design, where everything is gridded out. One thing lines up to another, sans serif typefaces. Here, the typeface is anything but legible. It's quite difficult to read this. It's sort of designed in a way almost to alienate the squares in society. So this is one example of the way that designers in the sort of counterculture reacted against the kind of corporate style of the Swiss International style. There's a quote from Paula Scher, who works at Pentagon, we've talked about before, where she's talking about how she saw Helvetica, I think it's in the movie Helvetica, where she's being interviewed about it, and she talks about the way that she felt like that font kind of represented all that was evil about corporate America. It's funny how these sort of styles become representative of a particular kind of approach. Another example of that reaction against was like the punk graphics of Jamie Reed. He did the graphics for the Sex Pistols, but also other designers of this era, where they were purposefully creating designs that were kind of low tech, cutting out photocopies of letters that are out of magazines, stuff like that. Something you could do in a very kind of easy, haphazard kind of way, and that there's a kind of aspect to it where it's purposefully not gridded. It's purposefully not like structured. There's a sense of chaos about the designs in some ways, and also of kind of breaking rules. So the idea is to sort of create these three posters. The museum, the design museum, I had added the logo, so I'll add this back onto here. I'd added a link for the logo. I have I can add it right now, actually. I don't know how I managed to not save. Oh no, it's here. Let me save that. It might have updated now. Oh yeah, I've got the rubric on here now. Oh, great. So I put a description in the rubric. If you look at the rubric, this is all you need to really think about. It needs to be submitted as a PDF. So ultimately, you'll have 3 different posters. And then you'll have 3 versions of those that you've done as mock-ups. The Swiss poster, I put a description here like I just talked about. So I won't go over this again, but it's basically the stuff I just mentioned. And then the hybrid poster is where you're trying to make a poster which represents both of these movements at the same time. And then the last one is deconstruction or grunge poster. Grunge is a movement which is sort of associated with deconstruction. So oftentimes David Carson, who's cited as a deconstruction designer, is also oftentimes labeled as a grunge designer. There's a big overlap. It's the same time period, the 1990s. And a lot of the stylistic aspects cross over completely. You know, these categories are obviously not kind of sealed containers. People move through it, and there is aspects of some which bleeds over. So even with deconstruction, some of the things that the Swiss International style use, for instance, like the use of negative space, is also actually used in deconstruction quite often. But there's a brief description here. But I would like you to do a little bit of research on your own. So I've added the links that were on the handout for the last class into here so that you can use those as reference, and also the different designers for you to take a look at for those different movements. This is the logo. So the logo that I'm providing here is the a vector version of the logo. You can do the poster in whichever software you want or combination of software. You might even do the poster by hand, certainly for the deconstruction one. With deconstruction, you're oftentimes showing the process of design, actually. So, you know, they'll use like bits of tape and pens, and there might be fingerprints on the side of it, stuff like that, because it shows the process of the design as part of it. So you could even do stuff by hand, but ultimately you're going to turn in a multi-page PDF that has the 3 flat versions of the poster, and then the 3 posters presented in as a mock-up in Photoshop where it's in context, some kind, like on a wall or on some kind of a frame and so on. Kind of like we did for the print graphics and the screen graphics, or the print graphics anyway, for the visual identity program. So does anybody have any questions regarding this project? I had originally said that I want to see something this week. I don't know if you've done anything on it, but I decided that as this is the last project in the semester, you can have up until the end of the semester to turn this in completed. So maybe you can work on this, like if you're not getting anywhere with the visual identity, or you want to take a break from it, you can work on this sort of simultaneously, and then you can present it when we come to class, and we can talk about how you can improve it. Okay, the other thing I wanted to show you, I found some examples of that relate to the animated logo that I have. Some of them I've created over recently as well for another class. And so these are all in Animate. One of the things I'd started exploring is this idea of taking a piece of type and breaking it up into pieces and then moving those pieces. So in Animate, like I talked about before, we have a symbol, and a symbol is kind of like a container. So at the top here, I've got this black layer, which is just making everything negative. I'll take that off for a second. On this next layer down, I have the actual symbol that I'm using with the slice inside. I have another duplicate of that underneath. So let me label these layers. This one's going to be called slice, and then this one we'll call blurred slice. So on the slice one, this is the one that you see here as being like totally crisp. The blurred one is blurred by using the layer and then applying the blur to that particular layer. So it's actually an exact copy of the other one. I've just blurred out the x-axis, so the blur is going horizontally across here. You can adjust this further. It's unlocked actually. So you can adjust how far that blurs. I think I might have gone as far as it can go actually. The other thing that it's got is there's on the animation, there's a part of it at the beginning where this stays still. And the way that I'm making it stay still is by selecting this object, and then in the properties, you guys out of the way for a second. So in the properties over here, at this point in the timeline, you can see that it's set to play graphic as a loop. I could also have it set to just play it once, but as a loop, it will just keep playing that over and over again. I put a video sound in here, which isn't working properly. Let me take that off. On this first part right here, though, I have that same thing set to just play one frame. So it's basically staying on frame 1 for as long as that keyframe exists. And then when it gets to here, it's the exact same symbol in the same place, but instead of it playing just that first frame, it's now looping through all the other frames. To get inside the symbol, remember, you just double click on it. And then if I go inside here, you can see that I have all of these layers. Each of the layers is numbered. So this actually started out in Illustrator. I began by doing this. I'll sort of do it over again. I'm going to add a piece of type, and then once I've made a piece of type, as you probably know in Illustrator, you can convert it to outlines. So to convert it out to outlines, I can do Shift Command O, or I could choose Type Create Outlines down here. Once I've done that, I want to create a series of lines that go across it. So I brought the grid up, and I'll put Snap to Grid on. That way my lines can be really consistent. I can draw one line that goes through here. I'm going to use this to divide it. So I'll make it red just so you can see it a little bit better. And then I'm going to make a duplicate. I'm going to drag this down 3 lines and then do Command D. So Command D is Object, Transform, Transform again. This last one I don't need because it's not covering anything in the type. I'm actually going to nudge this down so it's a little bit more evenly slicing through the type. I've got a similar amount top and bottom. And then I'll select all of this, and in Pathfinder, I'll hit Divide. I don't need the grid anymore, or Snap to Grid. Take that off. And then if I choose the Magic Wand tool, I can click on one of these shapes, which has 0 color. So because all of these have 0 fill or 0 stroke, it selects all of those empty bits that were in between the letters where it divided it. And now we just have those actual shapes. What I want to do is ungroup everything, because right now it's a group. And I want them to be in groups based off of these strips. So if I drag across like that, I can group this and then hide it. That way it makes it easier for me to select the next row. Then I can select this, group it, and then hide it. So to group it, I'm doing Command G or Control G if you're on a PC. And then to hide it is Command 3 or Control 3. So if you forget the keyboard shortcut, to hide it would be right here, Object Hide Selection. So I select this one, group it, hide it. Select this next row, group it, hide it. Command G, Command 3. Or Control G, Control G. Control G, Control 3, sorry. And then group, hide, group, hide, okay. So now I've got those, I can bring them all back again now. Option Command 3 will bring them back up. So that's show all. By doing that, I've got all these separate groups. Now there's a bit here that I've missed somehow. So let's take a look at that and see which bits I've missed. I've got a group there. I've got a group there. I don't have a group here though, next to it. So I missed this group. That's also part of it. I want to make sure that this isn't part of some other group. No, it doesn't seem to be. So somehow I managed to forget to do that one. That one's not grouped. Okay. So let's group all that and hide that as well. And then that's probably it actually. All the rest of these are grouped. Okay, and then I'll do Option Command 3 to bring them up. So once I've done that, you can see that I've got these different groups for those different slices. What I want to do is convert those groups into layers by going to Release to Layers sequence. And then I'll take all of those layers and drag them out of this initial layer, because what it's actually making is sub layers at this point. So I select the top one, hold Shift, select the bottom one, drag that out, and then delete the layer one. Okay, so now I've got my Illustrator file set up the way I want it. I can go to File, Save As. Now I'll bring this into Animate. So I'm going to set 1280 to 720. Obviously, this depends on exactly what you're doing, but because all of this is vector-based, it's pretty easy for us to rescale stuff if we need to. So right now in Animate, just to give you a quick tour again, we've got the tools, just like pretty much any of the Creative Cloud. At the bottom, we've got the timeline where you do a lot of what you're going to do. This also includes the layers that we're going to import. And then on the side here, we've got the properties, where you'll make a lot of changes to settings and so on. I'm going to start off by going to the rectangle tool. And I'm going to set it so that it's got no stroke and just draw a rectangle. I think I've done this in one of the demonstrations with you before. This is just a quick way for me to get an empty container, but actually on the stage in the right, basically in the right position. So I'll choose Convert to Symbol. I want the animation not to be on the main timeline, but to be inside of a symbol because it gives me a lot more control over it. I can move that animation around on the stage. I can duplicate it and so on. So I'm going to call this one Slice. I'm going to choose Graphic Symbol. And then to get inside the symbol, remember Scene 1, that's the main timeline. But if I double click, I'm now inside the slice. This is a separate timeline for this. We don't actually need this rectangle, so I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to choose File, Import, Import to Stage. From here, I'm going to find the Illustrator file that I just exported. So that's this one. Press Open. And here I'm going to set it so that all of these layers are imported as animate layers. Hit import. Now they might not necessarily be in the right order, which is a bit annoying, but I have a feeling that these might not be. So let's check. This one should really be, the one at the top should really be this area right here. So if I can select it, you can see that this actually is near the bottom. So I'll drag this. It's better if they're in the right order because it makes it much easier for me to control it afterwards. And then let's turn this one off. This one's not, the next one down. That one is neither. That one is neither. So this is the next one down. Let's go all the way down to the bottom. So the next one after that is this one. So I need to put these all in order. I realize that this is a little bit slow going. So I'm going to go back to the one that I've already got set up. Basically, once I've got them all set up in that way, I'm going to delete a couple of things from this file by going outside of it. I'm going to delete this black layer for right now. We don't need this. This is overcomplicated. I'm going to delete the audio layer. So there's just a couple of layers that are doing this. And for right now, let's delete this. So that we've just got this animation inside here. So after I've imported it, I'm going to delete these tweens also. And I'm going to delete all of these frames except for the beginning, just so that we can kind of backtrack a little bit. So I'm going to choose Remove Frames. So we've got a little bit more, but I think that's okay. So these are, I've put them in the correct order. So if I close them off, you can see that they close off in the correct order. After that, if I go down and I want to add some additional keyframes, I'm going to go down to about 3 seconds. I selected the bottom or the top and then held shift and selected the other way. And then I can either right click or control click and choose insert keyframe, and it'll add it all the way through there. So it's actually adding frames in between as well. Right now, this is just lasting for 3 seconds now, the animation, but it isn't actually doing anything. And then through here, I'm also going to select, again, right click or control click, and I'm going to create a classic tween on all of those layers. Didn't quite get it. I must have lost my selection. You can actually select through several, that way it's easier to click on it. And then I'll create a classic tween. What I want to do then is, in turn, at this point in the timeline where it's over here, I want to have it slide from the bottom. So starting at the second one, actually, I'm going to select this keyframe, and then I'm going to move this over just a little bit. Then I'll lock that layer, go to the next one, and move this one over a little bit more. Then I'm going to lock that, move this a little bit more. And this time I'm actually going to have it go further. So this one I was nudging it 1, then 2. This one I've actually added it 4 now, just so that it starts to accelerate that movement towards the bottom. So I'm going to make this one 6, lock that one, make this one 7. I missed one there, didn't I? But you get the idea. So I would then move those over. I'm going to go back to the point where I have my original stuff in there. Okay. So basically I have this point in the timeline where it comes across, and then this point in the timeline where it comes back again. The other thing that makes the movement better, the thing that makes the movement feel more natural anyway, is that I've put an easing setting on. So you may remember that from the last demonstrations. If I select through one of these, you can see that it has a cubic ease in, ease out. So ease in is where it's accelerating, ease out is where it's decelerating. So it means that the movement as it goes across here is starting off slow and then gradually accelerates, and then it slows down again at the end. And then when it comes back, it starts slow, accelerates, and then it slows down again at the end. So that was that one. I had another one, which was one I was trying to find before. I think I'd mentioned it in one of the classes. This is much more time consuming and kind of elaborate in some ways, but it's a good challenge if you're interested in animating letter forms. This is basically a frame by frame animation. It is a frame by frame animation. There's a little bit outside of that. So on the main timeline, it just has, it's actually running a little bit slow, but let's see. On the main timeline, I'm taking this symbol, and at the end, I'm kind of giving it a little bit of squash and stretch to just kind of move it a little bit. But inside the symbol is where the frame by frame animation is. So it's got a couple of layers here, which are guide layers. You can see that they're only shown as a outline. Also, because it's set as a guide, which I can do by control clicking here and choosing guide, it doesn't actually export along with the rest of the thing when you export it as a video or export it as an SWF to test it. You only see that in this screen if you're viewing the guide. It's kind of like guides in any program like Illustrator or Photoshop. It's something which shows up when you're working on it. So this is a way when you're doing the frame by frame animation that you can adjust the, you know, where to fill into the letter J. So I'm basically filling into those areas. and then I clean it up. So at first when it comes in, I have these kind of splashes that I'm doing that are following a trajectory which I've drawn previously going into the J. And then it comes around and then fills up the J there. And then it starts to fill back into that other part of the letter J at the bottom. And there's a little splash at the end before it settles into its position. So that's a little time consuming to do that. And it also would help to do that. You sort of need to have a tablet to be able to draw with that. You could perhaps get away with a mouse, but it'd be pretty hard to do it, I think, with a mouse. The final version of the J is actually a font. So it's only at the very end it gets to that point. Prior to that, it's actually like this part is just drawn. Then it's cleaned up a little bit. And then finally, it's the actual letter form, which is broken apart and put in. So it ends up tightening up right at the end. So it has a more fluid feel right up until that last part. I also had this one, which is really similar to the one I just showed you. It's got a series of lines which break apart. I don't remember if I showed you this one last week, but basically it's one symbol. I'm overlapping it, and on this layer, let me see. Yeah, this layer, I'm blending them. I'm changing the blending mode for the layer to hard light. So if it was on normal, once my computer frees up, I'm pushing it a little bit with all this software I have open. Let me close a couple of the programs. So this is what it would look like. It's just one, I've tinted it. So here you can change, it's the exact same symbol as the other one. The type, if I go inside of it, is still black. But I can change the color of it by using a tint over the top of it over here in the properties under color effect. So by default, this would be none. You click on here, you choose tint, and then you can choose whatever color you want to apply. And then after I've done that, on this layer itself, so with the layer selected, not the symbol, I've changed the color effect. Sorry, I've changed the blending mode right here instead of normal to hard light so that it blends with what's underneath. So my tint was actually more of an orange color like this. And so they kind of interact with each other when they overlap. And then I had another one, which is spinning type. And then this will be the last one I'll show you, and then I'll see what you guys have to present. I'll cancel this. We can view it here. It's being a bit slow. To add the sound into the file, I would recommend, although I don't think it's actually necessary, that it's on its own layer, but I always think it's better to put it on its own layer. I can't remember, it might actually have to be on its own layer, but you would have a keyframe, and then in that keyframe is where it's going to start, and then you would choose a piece of music and import it. So I've already got this one imported into my library, Spaceship. But to import it, it would be just like importing anything else. So you would do file, import, import to stage, just like I imported the Illustrator file. And then you can find the file that you want to use as a sample. So for instance, if I did a search for MP3, I could find the file I'm looking for. But as I've already got this one in here, if it wasn't on the timeline, so if there was no sound on this layer right now, but I had imported it into the library, I could click on the keyframe here and go to where it says sound and choose a file. So if I had more than one in the library, you could choose whichever one you wanted. In this case, I've only got that one. The other thing you should be aware of with the sound is that you want to have it set to stream for something like this. not event. If it's on event, that sound would be something where it's triggered by something, like it's triggered by a click or something like that. And stream is really what you want if you want to play through a whole piece of music like this. Let me go spin it. So on this one, it's actually fairly simple. Again, it was set up in Illustrator, so a series of layers. If you look at the layers, there's one which is the center circle, and this has a tween which goes between first one position and then back the opposite direction. And then underneath that, there's another circle which is sort of doing the same thing. So it's spinning in one direction, then spins in the other direction. And then the piece of type is actually just spinning once in one direction. We could actually take this, starting on the very first keyframe. If I select across that and hold Option and drag it, I can make it go out to here. I need to bring that back one frame. For some reason, this is a little bit off. Let me make my timeline a little bigger so I can see what's going on here. Oh, this one's slightly off, that's why. I'll just control click on this and choose to remove frames. So we don't have an extra empty frame there at the end. And then this one, I'm going to reverse it. Oh, I actually have to select from here to here, I think. So now it has the type coming this way, and then it should be going back the other way, but it's going to work. No, it didn't go back the other way. Why is that? Oh, it's just slow. Again, I've got easing settings on here. So this is a cubic ease in, ease out. If you don't have that on, it'll feel like the movement feels much more mechanical. Here, it feels like it almost like it starts spinning slowly, and then it gradually speeds up when it gets down, and then it does the same thing again back the other way. If it didn't have any of that easing on, it would feel much more mechanical. So if I set this to no ease, I set all this to no ease. There's no acceleration or deceleration. Actually, on this, it doesn't look too bad. I think I'll leave this one for now. But I'll do a demonstration for this one after, or make a video for it. But basically, if you want something to follow a particular path, we could do it a couple of ways. One is with a motion tween, and one is by using a guide layer. But I think I'll leave that one for right now. This one was just another example of a sort of frame by frame animation. So like to make something splash, it's a very simple drawing technique. And then this one was also like the idea of a frame by frame animation. If you just, if you're experimenting with animation, you could just draw one frame. And then remember that you have the onion skinning effect. So you can see the previous drawing and the drawing ahead, or I can just have that one preview of just the drawings before it. So if I go to this one, if I wanted to, I could have all those frames. Obviously, that gets a little bit confusing seeing so many frames. But as we're drawing it frame by frame, at this point, you can see that I've got a frame in between. I've mentioned this before, that you quite commonly animate on twos. So I could just insert another frame. And then I could insert a blank keyframe. And then with these preceding frames, I can see where I want to go next. So this may not be relevant, but I don't know exactly what you want to do in your logo. So if you start thinking about how you want to animate it, and you're not sure how to do it, I'll show you how to do it. All right. Do you have anything you want to show me in terms of progress on the project so far, either Kevin or Aldrich?
Hey, John. Yeah, I animated the logo, and I also did the, the other parts to it, for the screen graphics.
Excellent. Do you want to share your
So,
screen, or shall I look at the stuff that you uploaded?
you can look on what I uploaded.
Okay.
I submitted it to the
screen.
screen graphics
Okay.
assignment.
All right. Very good. I think it's probably best to download it.
So the link on that first page, I put that there, and it would take you to I guess the e-publish.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Let's see if I can quit anything else. Yeah. All right, very good. I have one suggestion on this page. Is the type that you're placing onto this page, is it in InDesign, or is it in the Photoshop file?
That's in InDesign.
It's in InDesign. Because I did have a thought on this one. This is just a suggestion, but if you were to do the logo and the brand guidelines just for this page, maybe because it's the cover, if you did that if you took it into Photoshop, actually you might even be able to do it in InDesign. Actually, if you just change the blending mode to multiply, so that it fits with the texture of the paper. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought of that. I did do that on the color, the color swatch page, so you can see how that looked. But yeah, then it made me think about everything else. Like,
yeah, like whether you should overlap everything.
Yeah.
Here you're overlapping it, right? On the
yeah.
It's looking really good. All right, cool. Oh, very nice. Are you happy with it?
Yeah, I was. It took a while. I did Photoshop. Frame by frame, a frame animation. But I think it paid off. And then like with the NV, the two types, I thought like I wanted to see how it would look fading out to black.
Yeah.
And then just having one like if it was just continuous. But I just thought like I worked.
So when you made that thing going across like that, you made it as a frame by frame animation?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like in Photoshop, kind of similar to like in Animate, how you were showing, where all it was making just a white bar.
A white gradient, right?
Yeah, a white gradient bar, and then the starting position was on the far left, off frame, and then
you
I said
moved it a certain amount, and then
yeah, so like
fade in the layer.
Yeah, so it was in that start position, and then I chose another, create another keyframe and put it in the, on the far right, and then it made the movement. It figured it out in between.
Oh, so you did it as a video layer, no?
Well,
do it as a video timeline?
no, it was a frame by frame time.
Oh, I can't quite picture that. So it automatically created the frames in between.
Well, it like moves it across from the starting point to the ending point.
You'll have to.
So
Can you show me that? Are you at a computer? Oh, you're in the car, right?
No, yeah, I could definitely show you on Thursday.
Yeah, show me on Thursday. I didn't quite understand that, but it might be. I'm not sure if I'm misunderstanding it or whether maybe you're doing something I just don't know. Like I don't know how to do that in Photoshop.
Okay.
But that sounds kind of interesting, actually. Aldrich, how have you gone? It looks really good, Kevin. I think it's coming along great.
All right. Thanks.
Aldrich, do you want to share any progress you've made on your project since last week?
Let me see. I'm not sure too much. I'm not sure how much progress I have to show right now.
Oh, okay. Do you want to wait till Thursday then?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Okay. All right. So in that case, then I guess we'll wrap it up. But do you have any questions for me about like the new project or anything else? Technical questions or questions about the assignments themselves?
No questions over here, John. It seems pretty straightforward.
Okay, great. One other thing I'll just point out again was I had introduced this last week as well, and I sort of just let it go, but I'll try to make a little bit more of it. It's a little bit weird. It's a little bit of a weird idea. I realize this, that there's no points attached to this. So the incentive seems like there isn't really an incentive to do it. But under the discussions, I had set up a thing for a piece of design a day. Sorry, it's so slow. Anyway, the idea of that is it came from sort of two sources. It came from first of all, I think I mentioned this when I first introduced the idea, that I had done a month of collages. This is probably 20 years ago, but it was a way I kind of got stuck with being creative and trying to do some of my own work. I was too busy with work itself to try and do my own stuff. And so I started doing this month where I decided every day I would make a collage. And so this is inspired partly from that and also partly by, I can't think of the guy's name now. Do you know of an artist who not long ago made a lot of noise because he sold an NFT for like masses, about millions of dollars? Do you know who I'm talking about? Just totally can't think of his name. NFT artist.
Yeah, I don't remember the name, but I remember you talking about it.
Yeah. Beeple. So this was something that happened, I think, last year at Christie's. They sold an NFT. Do you know what an NFT is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they sold an NFT for 69 million. The piece that they sold was made out of 5,000 of his pieces of art. So for 13 years, he made these different pieces of digital art. And the NFT that he sold was all of them combined together. But his idea was that you do a piece of work every single day as a way to improve your skills. And I think it's a really good exercise to get into. It's very difficult to do. The idea that he did it every day for 13 years is remarkable to me. I've tried doing it, and usually I find that there'll be always a day where I'm just too busy and I never get to it. And then I'll try to do two the next day. But also when I was in college, we had to do a sketchbook all the time. So if you think of it sort of like doing a sketchbook and just try to create some kind of digital design, you could even do stuff by hand and scan it in or photograph if you want. But like just get into the practice of thinking about, how you could develop in your own approach, your own kind of approaches to making images, or you could focus on typography, or you could focus on doing logo designs, or you could focus on whatever you want, really. Just the repetitive process of always deciding, I'm going to sit down, even if it's for 5 minutes, and create something, and then share it into that discussion. Then hopefully it can sort of build up some momentum. So I haven't added anything to it since last week, but I'll try to start adding stuff myself as well. All right, I'm going to end the meeting. I'll post the video after the class, and then I'll see you guys on Thursday.
All right, John. Sounds good.
All right, see you.
Thank you. Bye.